He's a 10.
I choose this family.
Hey everyone, and welcome to episode 10 of the 911 Lone Star Roundup. I'm one of your hosts, EJ, and with me are my lovely co-hosts, Grace.
Hey.
And Katie.
Hi guys.
Today we're going to be talking about episode 10 of Lone Star, titled Austin, We Have a Problem. Just a reminder, we're just kind of talking about what stood out to us and not going to be recapping the entire episode. So let's get talking.
And of course, the infamous juice bar scene.
I love that scene.
Me too.
It's honestly maybe my favorite. I mean, I don't think it's like my favorite Tarlos scene. I think it might be like number 2. I'm not really sure, but like I just love it so much. Like when I need to laugh or when I just need to be happy, I just watch that.
Yeah, so such a good scene.
It's such a good scene. We see them being comfortable with each other. We get a one-on-one talking.
Yeah.
And like, it's just so good. And TK's a stitch, and that's like the first part of that.
Yeah.
Talking about boba.
Yeah.
I have never had the drink before. I did not know it existed before this. I'm like, delicious blobs of snot.
Yeah.
That's appealing.
It perfectly describes it though. Like I never really thought about that before. Like it honestly is delicious blobs of snot. Like, yes.
Yeah. It's so funny. I have a friend who had never tried that, and one time we were at a cafe and they're like, oh, do you want tapioca in your coffee? And she didn't know what that meant, so she said yes. And so I recorded her videoing showing that, and it came up on our memories this past year. And so I hunted down a GIF of TK saying that, and I sent it to her. And she goes, oh my god, that's perfect. And I was like, yeah, that was perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just looked it up, and so the blobs of snot are tapioca balls. Mm-hmm. I actually like tapioca.
Yeah.
We made a tapioca pudding when I was growing up, and it's so good. But I can't imagine having those floating around in the drink.
Yeah.
It's an acquired thing. I think I've only had it like twice.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not something I drink all the time.
Yeah.
I can only imagine Carlos's indulgence of all of.
Yeah, he's just like sitting there taking it all.
It's like, okay, I'm just listening. Go ahead, Tarlos.
But I love how he's like, eventually he's kind of like, okay, and he starts listing off all the things TK was talking about. And I thought it was hilarious that like TK was talking about the Cowboys running game, which is one of the football teams in Texas.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, I love football. It's my favorite sport. So I was like, but the Cowboys?
Yeah, seriously.
I'm not a no hate zone, but go Hawks.
Yeah. Yes.
Grace and I are Seahawks fans, so.
Well, also before I was a Seahawks fan, I grew up with the Washington Redskins, or now just the Washington team. And the Washington team and the Cowboys were like severe rivals.
Yeah.
So like already, that was instilled in me from a young age.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
Same.
Yeah.
Oh my god. Billie Eilish, Cowboys running game, and the underrated film Benjamin Button. Yeah. Which I have never seen before.
Yeah, I haven't
either. Existed.
Basically everything that I like literally I'm not a fan of, or that I just don't really care to be a fan of, he mentioned. I'm just like, okay.
Same, actually. I've never had boba. I don't like Billie Eilish. The Cowboys running game, well, I don't like the Cowboys. And I've never heard of Benjamin Button before.
Yeah.
So for those of you out there who do enjoy any of those, we are sorry that we don't share that. But no judgment here.
Yeah, no judgment. Just not my thing, not my style. Like,
yeah, same.
Nope.
And I love how Carlos finally gets to like the point. I was like, how long are we gonna avoid talking about this, TK? Like,
He's
the elephant in the juice bar.
I loved that so much. I like died listening to that because I'm like, I love that. I love that so much. Thank you, Carlos. I also like how direct he is, because I think this is. Well, we see it in, like, the police scene, but that's more of a, like, the police station scene, but that's more of a professional context. And we did see it a little bit with the dinner scene as well. But, like, I just appreciate how direct he is. He's like, okay, let's get to the point. I'm tired of skipping over this.
No,
like, love that quality.
Yeah, and I think, Carlos, after TK's, like, once he says, like, us, and Carlos goes on, I think Carlos was kind of in the spotlight. He was trying to figure things out, and he was so confused. Like, this, through the entire season, season. TK's kind of been on again, off again with his emotions.
Oh, yeah.
So he's probably definitely questioning, where's we stand, and he has feelings that he didn't expect to have. Like, he even says it. He's like, when I saw you in that hospital bed, not knowing if you'd ever wake up, I had all these feelings that they've only known each other a short time, so he wouldn't expect to have. So I think he wanted to be direct because I think it gave me the feeling that he's been hurt in the past, and he just kind of wanted to be upfront about, like, where are we, because I don't want to be hurt again.
Yeah, I think this shows a lot of how TK has grown, because he did not go running at the mention of us, which we have seen him do in the past.
Yeah.
And so that speaks a lot to, like, his development, where he's at. Like, he's actually listening to Carlos. And I think we honestly can see he doesn't want to hurt him, but he's confused. Mm-hmm. But he's listening. And so that's big. Yeah. And, like, we're seeing communication here.
Yeah. That is true. And yeah, communication is good.
Always. Yeah, that would solve so many of the world's problems if people just communicated.
Yeah. And I'm glad that TK opened up and, shared his feelings and, like, honestly, I have no idea. Like, and that's like an okay response. Like, it's not ideal sometimes, but it's definitely better than, trying to lie or blub around and try and figure out what you want to say or being gentle about it.
Better than putting himself forward, like being like, oh yeah, let's do this when he wasn't feeling it, because that's not fair to him or Carlos, or running away again. Yeah. Like, it's like, obviously that's not maybe what Carlos wanted here, or maybe not even really what TK wanted to say, but it was honest, and that was important.
Do you guys think that earlier in the season, if Carlos had asked him that, would he have been honest with him? Or do you think it was because of his, like, reevaluating everything with getting shot that this happened?
Not before episode 3. Possibly after, like, maybe 5, I'm thinking. Because before episode 3, he, like, kind of, like, walked... Well, he did. He walked out at him in the dinner scene. So, like, I could imagine it then if they had a conversation like this, that it would have went well. But maybe after episode 5, because I think at episode 5, you could tell that he was basically at home in Austin, and that he was even more comfortable at the end of the episode with Carlos and stuff like that. So I feel like then they probably could have.
Yeah, I agree. Again, before episode 5, like, a lot of things shifted in the police station scene.
Right.
But really the next thing we see of them after the police station scene is episode 5, and I would have loved to know what happened in between those times. I don't think he would have tried to fib his way out of it necessarily. I think he just would have done a straight up avoidance of it.
Yeah.
Because TK, and I think this is very similar to how, Ronan is himself, very honest, very direct, but, I just don't think it would have been quite the same as, like, it would have been earlier.
Yeah, he needed some time to grow.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that, after he's like, I feel like you're mad or upset, and, it's like, but Carlos even responds like, no, you sound pretty reasonable. It's not meant to be. It's not meant to be. And I'm like, I don't know. I felt bad for Carlos in that moment, just because.
Me too.
I think he was hoping for more. But
I think he was hoping for more, but I don't know if he was holding out hope for more, if that makes any sense.
Well,
like, you could tell he was bummed.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And TK felt bad. He could see that he was bummed.
Yeah.
But also, he understood at the same time.
Yeah.
Right.
And he was like, he wasn't going to go chasing something which wasn't there, or that TK wasn't necessarily ready for, because we have seen him in the past back up when he realizes, okay, this was a little bit too much. So.
You're right. And, and like you guys were saying, he wasn't comfortable in Austin at first, and that really showed in the beginning, but as he grew to like Austin, he got more comfortable.
Yeah.
Because I think early on, like, he was literally there, and he's like, I'm just gonna have some fun, like, literally have some fun. And so they hooked up, and it was just a thing, and he didn't expect it to continue on, and it did.
I can't help but wonder, and this just occurred to me, but I can't help but wonder if, because he had only been there a shorter time, that maybe he didn't realize, well, Austin isn't necessarily a small town, but it's definitely smaller than New York.
Right.
I wonder if he was expecting to run into Carlos less than he wound up doing after the hookup scene. Like, he was like, oh, this is not quite the hookup and avoid that, like, he's likely used to from New York.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Carlos is on almost every other call that the 126 goes on, so he would see him pretty frequently.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not quite the easiest ghosting in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if they did a sort of ghosting, but, like, yeah, you guys get my point.
Yeah. I also like how in like this scene, when Carlos like asks him like whatever he says. Wait, what was I thinking? Oh, when he asks him like basically how he's feeling or whatever, and TK says like, I don't know, Carlos. Because, like, Ronan had said that, like, TK had never said Carlos's name before that. Like, that was the first.
And it wasn't even in the script.
No, it
if I
wasn't.
remember
He
correctly.
just did it. Yeah, exactly.
He was like, I need them to have the name.
Well,
was it at this scene or was it during the bus part?
No, it was this scene.
No, it was this scene, I think.
Because I thought he called out Carlos's name during the bus.
That would have been the second time, but no, this was the first time when he says, I don't, like, Carlos said, like, are we even a we or something like that, I think, and that's when TK, that's what it was, and TK
Honestly,
says...
I don't know Carlos.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And I'm so glad he did that. Because, we did get it during the bus scene.
Yeah.
But, like, we need a first name basis.
Yeah.
We hear Carlos use TK's name all the time. Both names.
Yeah. Many names, nicknames too.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the point
Tiger, TK, Tyler Kennedy.
And the whole point was that, like, Ronan felt it was, like, just so unnatural that he never said Carlos's name. So, like, it would only make sense in this moment that he said his name because, like, yeah, that's just, I love that.
Honestly, the only person we'd heard Carlos's name from before was Michelle. Because every other time we heard it, he was Officer Reyes.
Right, yeah.
If I'm remembering correctly. But nobody else had cause to call him by his first name.
Yeah.
So, I'm looking forward to more actual name calling.
Yeah.
During the second season.
Right, so as this scene is kind of winding down, Carlos offers to pay, and TK's like, no, let me, and he's like, no, by what you're saying, you don't even know if you're going to be employed here soon, so I will pay.
I loved that. Like, this little bit of sass.
Sassy.
They're like, from what you said, you're about to be unemployed, so.
Yeah.
And then that's when kind of things start to go haywire.
The
little card reader zaps Carlos's hand, and then the Camaro goes off.
What I love is just before then he had said not like it's the end of the world, and then the world starts ending.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And it's like, okay.
You just jinxed yourself.
Yeah.
Boy, careful.
Yeah, no, I still, like, when he got zapped by the card reader, I still, like, did not know what was about to happen. I was just like, okay.
I thought that was just some mechanical malfunction, basically.
Yeah, I thought the same thing.
Yeah.
I was like, okay.
I love how, and it's a very little scene, but it kind of touches me how TK was like, whoa, you okay?
Yeah.
Just like... Yeah. Like, obviously, he had to say that. He would have been not that great of a person if he hadn't said that, but I kind of liked how it went down.
Yeah. Well, because Carlos gets zapped, then the Camaro starts flashing and its alarm goes off. So Carlos is, like, turning it off, and then the little scooter dashes across the road, and another scooter goes haywire, and somebody falls, and it's like, immediately they jump into kind of, like, first responder mode. And you're like, date's over.
It was like, okay, flip the switch.
Yeah, and then that's kind of when we see the start of, like, I don't know, the hectic intersection issues. Did the bus crash in front of them at that moment, or was it later on?
TK almost got run into.
Right.
Because the boy was not watching where he was going. Carlos pulled him aside, and it was, like, just the next moment.
Yeah.
Where the crash happened.
They showed the crash, and then, like, I think, like, TK started walking out there, but then I think it flashed to, like, before this happened, and then we were at the 126 at the house and stuff with, like, where Mateo and they were all in, like, the kitchen part, and that's when the espresso machine started acting haywire.
Oh, my gosh.
It wasn't working or whatever,
That's right.
That part was so funny.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, that's right. Because so Carlos and TK, they start to like handle things, and then like they kind of grab onto each other and like try to protect each other as the bus is crashing, and then they kind of like flash to like 5 minutes before at the 126.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Did the Michelle scene happen?
Yeah, it was right after the TK and Carlos scene when she gets knocked out and her phone goes,
Yeah.
that one guy that's been trying to rob her.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, yeah, the druggie.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, I was not expecting to see him again, but okay, that's a development.
Yep.
Yeah.
So the coffee maker and Paul gets blamed.
That was funny.
Yeah,
and
that
then
whole scene.
and then Owen walks in and Mateo's like, Paul did it.
and he was like, okay. He wasn't overreacting like they thought he was going.
Paul's like, objection, and Marjan like kind of looks at, I think she looks at like Judd or Paul and was like, I knew he was gonna do that.
But even Judd's response before Owen walks in is, that's why I've been saying we just need to buy a coffee pot. He's been on it. He's like, I just want coffee.
With the cream. Oh, I don't think it can do that.
Oh yeah. But and like when they started, you could definitely tell Owen was upset. And you know, like, and the team kind of quickly realized what was going on, so they're like, or something was up, so they chased after him.
Yeah.
Well, the fact that he didn't have much of a response to the fact that his espresso machine just went haywire.
Like, and he's just like, just call a repairman. It was
also,
so
I love how through that the team was like, oh, okay, something's wrong.
Right.
Because I love those little tells, like, okay, you didn't get upset about the coffee maker, something's wrong.
Right. So then team follows him up, finds him petting Buttercup in his office, and that's when they sit down and he tells them about what he found out from TK in the last episode was that TK wasn't sure he was coming back.
At first they didn't really understand, they thought it was a medical issue.
Mm-hmm.
Or they were like, wait, I thought he was going to be okay physically. But,
Yeah, it was, I mean, thing major happens in your life, it's easy to question things, so I'm surprised they didn't expect it, but they also just didn't, maybe because at this point they didn't know like TK's whole backstory. They knew enough to know that he'd come to come to Austin with his dad, but they didn't know the rest yet. So it just and I love that scene because it's like Buttercup is sitting right by Owen and you can tell he's sad.
Yeah.
He's just like sitting
and
there.
Buttercup was offering some lovin's. Okay.
He's like, I miss him too. And it was so cute.
I was like, oh, because like, I don't know if it was the last we saw of Buttercup, but like, one of the last parts we saw about him was him laying on TK's bed after TK got shot, just looking very forlorn because nobody was there.
Right. Yeah. Everybody left and TK didn't come back, so I'm so sad. And
he probably was able to sense something was wrong because dogs are like that.
Yep, dogs are very sensitive. And also in this scene, you know, Judd's giving advice to Owen, and I think is this when Owen calls him Cowboy Judd? He's like, Cowboy Judd's giving me advice, and then Judd's like, yeah, it's crazy to me too, or something like that.
Yeah.
I love how they were all like, but he was made to do this job. Because they can all see that, like, TK was made to do this. And he was like, yeah, he was made to do firefighting, but he needs to figure it out on his own. And that's true. You can't make people believe something.
Right.
Especially if it has to do with, like, self-discovery. Like, they need to figure it out.
Yeah. And then at this point, you know, Rosewater comes in looking for Michelle because he can't get a hold of her. And then the house goes crazy with alarms going off and random things happening around the firehouse. I'm like, what's going on? I think
the coffee maker is working
when it's unplugged.
Hello. Oh my god. Yeah.
I mean, and at that moment, they're like, oh, it's just a power surge. So, like, let's go turn everything off and fix everything. But then they realize, like, battery-powered things that weren't plugged in were going off. And
Yeah.
which
I just love how the ladder truck, like, the ladder is, like, raising,
Yeah.
the lower.
it's
Yeah.
got a mind of its own.
It feels like it's haunted in that moment. Like, okay, what the hell's happening?
Yeah, somebody referenced a movie or something, and I can't remember which one it was. It was some like sci-fi show. Like, Ghost in the Machine. It wasn't Ghost in the Machine, but it was like that kind
of theme. Yeah, I don't remember what it was either.
Right, which and then as they're kind of starting to clean everything up, we get the somebody pulls up the news on TV, and they are able to kind of see a solar surge, and then they learn that it's a coronal mass ejection, which is something that comes from the sun, the solar flare. And it just, like, it really messes with electronics.
And then it switches to some really weird show.
Yeah, some Japanese show or something like that.
I was like, I had this moment of going, oh my god, okay, good, no. Just watching what was going on. And Owen tried to get hold of Dispatch on the radio. And it just kept switching all over the place.
Yeah, and he finally gets a hold of him long enough to be like, what's going on? And they get like half a response, and then it switches again. And yeah.
I was like, oh my gosh. Which was then where the TV came in.
Yeah, and I really liked how they did it, because I've seen shows where they've dealt with this situation. Was that Cooper?
Yeah, that was Cooper.
I don't know going on. What?
I couldn't not. I was like, oh my god.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, I like, because I've seen shows where they've done it where like a nuclear bomb goes off and there's an EMP, which is an electromagnetic pulse that can really mess with electronics, and it can like totally like fry them. So I've seen similar shows with like that element, but not really all the reaction. So that was kind of cool.
Then we switched to Grace at Dispatch.
Oh gosh, yes.
Oh my gosh, and the Doomsday Man.
Oh my god.
All right, I forgot about that.
I loved that line from her. Like, this guy's spouting all these things about like the Armageddon's coming, the end is near. Everybody,
and the look on her face, just like, and she's like, stop.
Yeah, because they're dealing with all the computers going haywire too, and I love her response. Is like, because he was. Then she starts quoting back scripture, because he'd been quoting scripture to her, and she's like, "But concerning that day and hour, no one knows, not even the angels in heaven, but only the Father." Matthew 24. Now I could go on all day, sir, but I do not have all day. Do you have an actual emergency? And I was like, so that is so Grace. Like, she can spout off scripture and then like go on.
Yeah, and the guy was like, "We all do. Judgment is near."
She's like, "Okay, well, sounds like you've got it all. Sounds like you're ready. Goodbye now."
Goodbye. I love her because I'm like, okay, my namesake is a little bit like me. Cool.
Yes. Throwing out the scripture, and like, I'm glad they did that though, because that would be like, if anything like that happened in real life, there would be the people who would be like, "Oh, the end is near and Revelation's coming." And I'm a Christian. I've read the Revelation. I know there's stuff.
It
that
scares
can
me
happen.
too much.
Yeah,
but I do know generally what it consists of.
But I love that Grace pulled back with scripture, because that's what you need to do. You need to follow that. If that's what you believe in. So.
Yeah.
Anyways, so then we get in the calls that she gets, is that air transport plane that crashed into some power lines.
Oh my gosh, that scene.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
That was challenging.
That was probably one of the I don't know how to phrase it, maybe most concerning emergencies for me of the show so far. Maybe because I've seen it in other shows, but it was like that kind of hit home. Just being like, oh wow, this is not great. I don't know if I'm making any sense, because I can't find the words I'm trying to use, but
it was definitely a very intense scene, because we find out that this plane crashed into the power lines when the solar flare happened, which caused, and he's transporting a passenger and his wife, who the passenger is on the way to get a liver transplant, so he's really like sick.
Yeah.
So it's not like he can just jump out of the plane.
Yeah, it'd kill him.
And there's power, like they try to get the power turned off, but with the solar flare, power is going all over the place and the lines are sparking, so they only have like just a few seconds to figure out what to do. And they finally get the pilot out and the wife out, and the guy's left up there, and so Owen goes to rescue him, and I'm like, I'm so glad TK was not there, or he would have had a panic attack.
Oh my god. Owen going across the power lines, it's like, hell no.
Yeah.
Like, hell to the no. Just no. I think that's my experiences with electrocution. Like, coming out there.
That's scary.
I'm just like, no.
Yeah. Well, and we did just get Billy, getting zapped by lightning just a few episodes.
Oh my gosh, yes.
So that was, like, fresh in our minds.
I was like, if you don't move fast enough, honey, you're gonna fry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Owen finally gets out of there, like, just as it's gonna, like, the electricity hits it. And I'm like, oh.
And it just goes a boom.
Yep. And he lands on the... Yeah. And I love how, because, like, they all jump down, and, so the crew ends up getting the guy after Owen helps him down. And, like, they get him off and send him over to paramedics, and then they're, like, just waiting for Owen. They're just waiting. And so he finally jumps down, and you can see, like, the plane exploding above him. Yeah. I was just like, that was a little too close for comfort there.
Way too close to comfort. And then Judd saying, well, I give you 2 for style and a 10 for timing.
I love that line. He had some really good lines this episode, I have to say. I mean,
he really did.
Yeah. And then we're back to, like, the bus flipping.
Finally with TK and Carlos.
Yeah. So basically, like, the bus, this is where, like, the bus, like, before you could see it crash, and I think here it basically did crash, but I like how, like, basically TK just starts running in the middle of the road just to help, and, like, Carlos stops him and just holds his arm, and then, like, once the bus crashes, they're just, like, holding each other, and I'm just like, I love that part.
Yeah.
Grabbing each other's pecs, basically.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like, holding on to each other, like, to protect each other. Yeah, that first responder instinct to protect your loved ones.
I'm like, oh,
yeah, it happens
go
for
happy
like
right now.
Yeah, it happens for like 1 second, but I love it so much.
Yes, it's like one of my favorite scenes. I mean, I think I love every Tarlos scene. Like, I know it's hard to like pick my favorite, but this is really good. And this is like, and it also showed on TK's side, like, if you really aren't sure you want to be a firefighter, why would you like go try help people? You know?
Yeah.
So that it's a good clue for him that it's where he's meant to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel
And
like
anybody. Oh, go on.
Oh, I feel like it's kind of like in a first responder's blood to like any cop, firefighter, whatever, they're off duty and they like see someone in need. They're not going to just sit there and be like, nah, I'm off duty. Like, they're gonna help. And I feel like TK's like, that's just in his DNA because like Rowan and stuff, but like just in general.
Yeah. And like, obviously, it takes certain person to become a first responder. So it doesn't just, as you say, it's in the blood. They aren't able to just leave it there. And they were trained to actually help in this kind of situation. So it's not like they're just bystanders trying to help. They're like, okay, we have the know-how. We do not have the equipment, unfortunately. But they had each other. Oh, that was so happy. Yeah.
Yeah, it's what happens is the garbage truck comes from one side of the intersection and the bus happens, so they kind of collide and the bus ends up flipping.
Because they both had switching traffic lights.
Because the traffic lights were both green.
Yeah.
Because of the
I thought they were flipping between red and green.
Well, because Carlos even said at the beginning scene, it's like, both lights are green, and TK's like, what? And he's like, both lights are green. Why are they both green? Or something like that.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
So that's why they collided in the intersection, because they both had green lights and didn't realize something was going on.
Yeah, and like, if the bus had collided with a regular car, the regular car would have been much worse off.
Right.
But the garbage truck was so much heavier, so much bigger.
Just sitting there.
It just sent the bus flying.
Right. And that's when, both of them jump into action. TK runs right to the bus and, like, starts getting people out, and, like, Carlos is getting people away. And I thought this was the moment, because because they get everybody off the bus except the driver, and TK goes in to check on her, and she's stuck. And
he runs out, he grabs the bumper.
yeah, and that's the moment when I thought Ronan had said it was the first time he'd ever addressed Carlos with his name, because I thought Ronan had said that when he grabbed the bumper and he was trying to help, because he was trying to get Carlos to keep the people away. I thought that was, but I guess it was earlier than maybe.
Yeah, it was like, I don't even know Carlos, like, how he truly felt, or if he could do a relationship, basically.
I think this one was the one that was slightly more attention grabbing, that it was his name, because he was just yelling it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, he had to make sure people stayed out of the road and stuff like that.
Yeah, it was a gas leak.
Yeah, the gas.
It was like, there's a gas leak here, get everybody back. Yeah.
And then, in doing that, TK, he's trying to do with what he can with what he's got around him, and he pops some of his stitches.
Yeah.
So
and the bus broke the fire hydrant. So not only is there a gas issue, but there's also a water issue.
Right. The bus is filling
and you'd think those would negate each other, but unfortunately they're both not working out
and
very
fuel
great.
will sit on top of water because of the buoyancy of that. And so then the bus is filling up with water. So the big problem is TK's kind of in a rush to get this gal out because
she's trapped flat on her back.
Yeah, and so
she can only sit up so much to be able to breathe.
Right.
Yeah.
And the way with the bus, the windows only go down so far. So if it's upside down, you've got like several feet worth of ceiling space between that and the windows. So there's nowhere for that water to go. And unfortunately, it comes to a point where TK realizes he can't get her out, and she's like, oh, just go. And she sees the blood on his shirt and he's like, don't worry about it, I just got shot. And she's like, well,
she's like, I thought I was having a bad day.
He's like,
oh no,
this was
before, not today.
It was before. Like TK, that was like maybe a week before.
Oh my god. I just loved that one line of, I thought I was having a bad day.
Right.
Yeah.
And do you guys remember the live or the story that Ronan posted on Instagram just after the finale?
Yes.
I think I've seen videos of
of him and
story.
Raphael in this scene, and he's got the jacket over his left side.
Yeah.
I think it was to cover up the blood from his thing.
Sneaky.
Yeah. I think that was what it was, because the bus flipping over was the last scene they filmed of the season.
Wow.
And I can save it for the end, I guess. And so they probably had to cover up TK's, bloody shirt. So, there was no spoilers that people were seeing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
TK has to do rescue breathing, which is where you take a breath and then you go underwater and you basically give the air that you've got in your lungs to the person that's underwater. And then he has to come back up for air, and they keep doing that. And he keeps doing that. And then all of a sudden you can kind of hear in the background the sirens, and then all of a sudden somebody's there, and it was somebody there grabbing him out, but it didn't know until the commercial came back that it was Owen.
Yeah, because he had on the breathing apparatus, so you couldn't see his face.
Right.
And I'd like to point out just now that this episode actually pulls back a lot of nostalgia from various episodes of 911, because back when the solar storm first happened, when everything was going haywire, it actually reminded me of the 7.1 earthquake, or whatever it was, that happened the second and third episode of season 2. Because if you remember from watching it, if anybody out there has watched it, everything was going very haywire in there too.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, the cell phones were out; they couldn't get service,
everything around the firehouse was basically going everywhere. What was the? Hang on, I lost my spot here because I went to. This scene actually pulls back the scene where. From the bus. And this scene actually pulls back 2 different scenes from the same episode. One is the boat rescue during the tsunami. Because if you remember, there was a man trapped. And the water came up, and they also had to do rescue breathing there.
Yeah, I think it was Eddie. Eddie had to do it with Hen.
Yes.
And Bobby had to go underneath to cut whatever was holding the guy down. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. And actually, just afterwards, and obviously we'll talk about this in a moment, but when they are pulling the woman out of the bus and they're bringing her by on stretcher, that actually makes me think of when May was trying to rescue a woman from the car during the tsunami.
That's right.
And her neck got injured, and she thought she died on her, but it actually turned out the woman was still alive.
Because she kept pressure on the gal's wound. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. This held so many parallels for me. Just drawing between the earthquake episode and the tsunami episode. So yeah, spoilers for 911, everybody.
That's okay. Yeah, no, that's good points. I'd forgotten about that, but yeah, you're right. That was the rescue breathing, especially.
Yeah,
it's not something that is often done unless it's in like an emergency situation. Obviously, this was. And I love like once we find out it's Owen and he's like pulling him out of the bus and they've got that song playing. Like that was like the perfect song for this whole scene. I don't know who sings it. It's Unsteady. Is that the song?
Yeah, I think it's Unsteady by the Ex-Ambassadors. I don't know how I remember that.
Yes, Ex-Ambassadors. I just looked it up.
I have like the Lone Star playlist, but I haven't listened to it in a while. So
yeah, it was like a perfect song. So the music department did a great choice with that one.
Their choices have been really great.
Yeah,
to be honest.
Yeah, the whole season has had some great music. I mean, and I love country music, so anytime they're in the bar and they got country music playing, I'm like, oh yeah, I love that song.
Yeah,
and Old Town Road. That was a good one too.
That's really good.
Yeah, and I love. So when Owen pulls him out and he lays TK on the ground, I have the nostalgia or the memory of episode 1 where TK's waking up from getting the Narcan in his leg.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And he's grabbing onto his dad. And like it was almost that exact parallel for me, seeing that. And
yeah, because in that scene, TK basically woken up from being dead.
Right.
And in this scene, he was completely worn out.
Mm-hmm. And he wasn't leaving that gal, and there was the fire, the bus had caught fire from the fuel tank that had ruptured.
And he didn't have air.
And he
didn't have a breathing apparatus.
Yeah, so there's smoke, there's the fire, there's the water. So and plus his popped stitches could have easily caused him, issues. So his dad again is rescuing him.
Yeah.
But thankfully with the team they're able to get her out, save her, and so I love that moment where TK like jumps up no matter like how Owen is trying to hold him down. And like he goes right to her and she's all thanking him.
Yeah, I really liked her. I was so glad she didn't die.
Yeah, me too.
Because there was truly a moment where I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be one of those scenes, isn't it? But I was so glad she made it out.
Right, and I think that was what TK needed, because remember in last episode, that's what Owen explained to him, was that he'd had his first taste of saving somebody when he was a lifeguard, and that stuck with him. And so this is TK's moment of saving someone. And then I loved what he did. He like turned to his dad and like hugged him, and he's like, "You saved us." And I loved Owen, like he's trying to like pass it off. He's like, "I think everybody saved everybody here today," but he just tries to kind of stay professional, but still like tell.
Also, there's a little bit of a line here. I don't know if it was meant to be in there, but if you think about it, in a way, Helen and the rescue may have saved TK himself from himself. And so, while I doubt that was what he was actually thinking, it's an interesting parallel to draw.
Yeah.
And then Owen gets back into dad mode and kind of insists that he gets on the ambulance himself to go get checked out because he sees the blood. And that's when we get the next parallel from the first episode of the pilot.
Oh my gosh,
is Tarlos coming up to Owen and saying, he's an impressive guy. And Owen saying, he's my son. And I was like, oh, I love that moment.
I loved that so much. Like, I kind of needed that scene.
Yes.
And aside from the hospital, that's really the only major interaction Carlos has regarding TK with Owen that we know of.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was just a really good scene. This entire series has been written really well. I feel like the writers have done an awesome job.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So then we get back in the homeless camp. Michelle wakes up inside a tent in the camp.
In the purple tent that's been mentioned.
In the purple tent.
We're
Sad
sad
purple
eyes.
tent.
Yeah.
Sad eyes, yeah.
And then we
And-
see her sister.
Yes. And, like, her reaction, she's just like, oh my gosh. I didn't know that, like, that would be when, like, she'd finally see her sister.
Yeah.
But I knew it'd have to be soon because they were wrapping up the season.
Right.
Yeah.
I was like, I didn't know if it was going to be, like, towards the end of the season, like, hold some suspense out for season 2.
Yeah.
But I was like, oh my gosh. When,
Yeah.
Well,
when
at
we got
first
there.
when Michelle started waking up, because obviously, so the guy that he knocked her out and stole the van, so then he left her, I guess, out there, and so then her sister saved her.
Mhm.
And so when she starts to wake up from kind of being knocked out, at first she's looking at her sister like this is a dream, and then when she
Right.
realizes it's real, she's like freaks out.
Yeah.
And
I was
then-
like, I knew it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad her sister's alive.
Yeah.
I feel bad for her though with all the mental stuff that she's going through, but I'm glad her
Yeah.
sister's alive.
Yeah. Because she has schizophrenia.
Yeah.
And, like, that is pretty tormenting to live with.
Yeah.
Because it makes them interpret reality, comes with paranoia, and we see that with her.
Yeah,
she
'cause
was
she's
paranoid.
explaining things.
Yeah. I've Googled it so much.
And, yeah, but I love how like we don't get a ton in the tent, but then like the next scene is Michelle and her sister at the hospital, and they're
Yeah.
talking, and so I apparently missed this every time I rewatched this show because I've rewatched it numerous times. Iris knows Carlos.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
she's like mad at him for not keeping Michelle out of trouble.
Oh,
With
Yeah.
all the issues that she was having, like I guess so Michelle was telling her about Iris's ex-boyfriend and all the drama, and Michelle's like,
Yeah.
well, who do you think keeps arresting me?
no. She's like, oh no, he did not.
Yeah. Like, I don't think there's like a very complicated reason why she knows of Carlos. Like,
I mean, I think they have a really long, they've known each other for a long time.
yeah,
So, and Iris only went missing 3 years previous.
yeah,
So I'm like, to me, I'm not surprised at all that she knew about Carlos.
Well, and I've seen references in other fans' ideas that she was friends with Carlos first because they're closer to the same age, and then Michelle and him became friends, and then when she disappeared, they kind of leaned on each other. That could be a possibility.
yeah,
Yeah, personally, I'm not sure, like, if I necessarily believe that's what happened, but
Yeah.
it is definitely a possibility.
I mean, that's more of a possibility than some of the crazy theories I've heard.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, and that does dispel the theory that they met afterwards during the investigation,
Yeah.
which I've heard that as well.
Right. Yeah. So, and I love how like their mom shows up and like kind of like the family's back together. But when Iris realizes that they're trying to like not let her go back to the camp and they want her to come home with them, she like freaks out and tries to leave. And when her
Yeah.
mom used her full name, she just like
Yeah.
stops no matter like what happened, like was going on. She just like freezes, and then her mom just gives her money and her jacket.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, because you can't make somebody, like, she's been living like that for 3 years. You can't make somebody, like,
You can't get him committed.
Yeah.
She's proven that she can take care of herself.
yeah,
Right.
well, she's a full-grown adult. She can't make her do that. But you also can't make somebody that's living homeless and has been for 3 years. Like, at that point, she's accustomed to that. You can't just make her come home. It's a hard transition.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and they even talk like I think Michelle and Owen talked about it towards the end of this episode about she'd found her sister and she can't really pursue trying to get her committed or anything because she can't, having lived on her own for 3 years in a homeless camp, they can't really prove that she can't take care of herself.
And then there's the space station scene.
Yeah, I love that one.
It made me cry.
I mean, same, but I still really like it.
Oh, I
yeah,
love it,
was
but it made
amazing.
me cry.
So the ISS was the first. I think that was who was trying to call when it first happened, like at the end of season 9, episode 9.
Yes.
And
Yeah, International Space Station.
yeah, and Houston, which is not far from Austin, is where they Johnson Space Center is, or is it the Kennedy Space Center? I don't remember. One
I'm
of them
looking
is
it
in
up.
Houston, and that's where they run mission control. And he got disconnected from Houston and got connected to Grace in Austin.
Johnson.
It is Johnson? Okay.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember. And, yeah, so it's looked like, because I think they keep a crew of 3 people up there at all times.
Yeah.
So 2 of his 3 people had already died from radiation poisoning because the solar flare passed by them first.
Yeah, we can see one other person
Yeah.
there who's obviously, and definitely not awake.
Yeah, so he's probably passed away.
Yeah.
And so he's trying to communicate with Houston, and Grace tries to reconnect him when she realizes that this isn't some crazy person calling.
Yeah.
Like the last person that she dealt with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love how he's like, well, unless you can treat acute radiation poisoning over the phone, I really don't think you can help me. And then the only thing he can do is say goodbye to his family, so she helps connect him to his family in Houston. And I just felt like that was such a heart-wrenching moment.
I sobbed during that whole
and,
call.
I felt so bad for Grace, because she's sitting there on the line listening to the goodbyes.
Yeah. And she hears when the guy stops answering his daughter. And obviously the daughter is very little, she doesn't realize what's happening, but the mom knows what's happening, Grace knows what's happening, obviously the guy knows what's happening.
Yeah.
So all in all, it's such a miserable moment for everybody, but
his family loses him, and he passes away because of his illness and injuries from being up there, and
because they were the ones to first get hit by the storm, and they didn't have the various layers that protect us to protect them.
Because our atmosphere protects us from the radiation from the sun's rays.
Yeah.
But up there, the solar flare that's coming through, they're going to get hit with all the radiation because they have no protection other than the little thin skin.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a tough scene, but it was really good, to see what Grace was able to do to help him out in the last moments.
I feel like that was an important scene to have as well, because up until then, we've had mostly happy endings scenes, and that was not a happy ending.
Yeah.
And as much as I would have loved it to have been, it was also representative of real life. It's being like, you can't save everybody. That was someone that nobody could have possibly saved.
Yeah.
Right.
For one thing, he was in space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just feel like, as heart-wrenching as it was just something that needed to take place in the episode.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And honestly, now that we're talking about it, it actually reminds me a lot of, the plane crash in season 1 of 911, how one guy, he wanted to call his wife. I believe she was pregnant, and he wanted to leave a message. He's like, the plane's going down. I want to tell my wife bye and that I love her, and blah, blah, blah. And that's what that reminds me of.
I also sobbed during that scene.
Yeah.
And when they found his body, it was like, oh, no.
And back then, Buck was a rookie firefighter.
Yes.
And he's like, this is his first big crash, and he's learning this, and he's looking for the survivors, and she's like, well, he's not on the survivor list, so you could check the black tent, and that's where they are putting the dead bodies, and it was just heart-wrenching.
Yeah,
for him.
And later we see him looking on as they're zipping up the body bag that holds the guy in it. So that's true. I did not draw that parallel. That is a very good that's a very good connection.
And then after this scene, we're back at the station. TK's already there. He's sitting, and then you just hear the doors go up and the truck's back in. And they had
He's
the
just,
perfect
anxiously.
Yeah, they had the perfect close up. So at first you can see he's drinking a soda or whatever, and then you can see its eye. And I'm like, that is kind of creepy. Just a very close up, but I like it. And I'm
Yeah, the close-up was really cool.
It was, it was
at first I didn't know who I was seeing. Then I pulled back and I was like, oh, okay, it's TK. And obviously he's jittery. As Owen says, why do you look like you're about to jump off a cliff? Honestly, it's true. He does look like he's about to jump. I imagine to him it actually felt like
metaphorically it was. Yeah. He was metaphorically doing it by telling, because and so the crew gathers around and they're excited to see him, and then wants to confess, and he's like, can I talk to you guys?
Yeah. And Owen's like, you sure you want to do this? He's like, yeah, I have to.
Well, TK's like, I'm an addict, and Owen's like TK, and TK is like, no, Dad, I have to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because up until then, nobody knew the full story, and so now it's an opportunity for him to finally come clean.
I feel like some people may have been able to guess various different things, like him knowing how long it had been since his breakup, like that was a very specific amount of days, and various things like that, but I don't think anyone had been able to draw the full parallels.
Yeah, I mean, I would maybe assume that they might have suspected something, because he had never obviously drank alcohol since they'd known him. Yeah. So I would assume they would have known something. I also, I feel like I really like this moment because it shows that he had to open up to them and kind of give them his perspective and his full story to be able to save lives with them, but also to just, I don't know, I feel like that's just when you're a family like they are, that's kind of what you have to do. And he was ready to open up and tell them his full truth.
Like before.
Right. And at first he wasn't.
Yeah, go on.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, at first he wasn't ready. He was hiding everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, but at this point, I feel like at the end of the season, he was ready.
I feel like this was the best point he could have done it, because by this point, they know him, they're friends with him, he's family. And if they had known it earlier, it might have warped some perspectives. Even unintentionally, that's something that happens. And I feel like this was important because they knew him well enough that this was just backstory and maybe explained a few things.
Yeah, and I love everyone's. And I love everyone's like reactions to it. Like Judd's like, "Hey, say whatever you gotta say," and like Paul's like, "Yeah, we got you, fam," and I'm just like,
yeah,
I love.
Right. And I was super proud of TK for just flat out saying I'm an addict.
Yeah.
Because it takes a lot of
it's not
guts
easy
to do that.
Yeah.
And I love, like, he's hesitant, but then he starts explaining everything. He, like, flat out explains everything from, like, I OD'd, and my dad, my captain, found me unconscious and saved me, like he does. And he goes on, and I'm proud of them. And I love the family that they pulled together, and they're like, oh, we got you, and
and then Mateo like pulling him into hug and just being like, to turn my shoulder, because it had already happened earlier.
Right. And I love like TK's monologue of just telling them, up until today I wasn't sure, and now, until you guys showed up, and then I realized, that this is what I want to do for the rest of my life, and I want to do it with you guys for the time being, and I choose this family, I think is the best line in that. Aside from I'm an addict, because he's choosing to be there because he wants to be there now and not just to follow in his dad's footsteps.
It's like it's his destiny, but it's also his choice,
right? And up until then, for all his life, he's wanted to be a firefighter because he probably was just trying to get closer to his dad.
Yeah, and he even says that, like, he suspects that is what it is, and like that is understandable, and to some degree it isn't necessarily wrong, but eventually you have to evaluate your reasons in a job like that.
Yeah.
And, he'd gone through a traumatic experience. And those are the ones that make you start having to reevaluate where you stand.
And I love the group hug, and Mateo pulling TK into a hug, and watch the stitches. And
Mateo stitches, dude.
And he's like, somebody's face break. Is that Judd?
He's like, well, that must be Judd. He's like, well, that's what you get for coming in at the end of a shift.
And I'm like, yes.
Yes. But you can definitely see the proud look on Owen's
Oh, he's so proud.
When, TK's going through this, and and he's like, I don't know, it's just they hug again, and like, are you sure? And then Owen's like, oh, let's go do this after this, and then he sees Carlos walk.
He's like, how many life decisions did you make today? He's like, one step at a time, Dad.
It's like, one step at a time, Dad.
I love that.
I'll see you at home. And it was just like,
maybe.
And that hug.
Tomorrow. Oh my god.
That hug.
And like, they just kind of snuggle into each other, and they're like, oh my god.
Yeah, and Carlos like basically buries his face into TK's arm, and I'm like,
I squealed. That is likely my favorite Tarlos scene. Just because
same.
Oh yeah.
It's so sweet.
Yeah. Well, and it just like TK's walking up to him and he's just like sighing in relief. Like he's just, his shoulders are relaxed. Like he's like, the weight of the world is off his shoulders now. He's told his like the family and he's made his decision and he's just relieved. And then Carlos is there and they just cuddle up together.
And Carlos
so
looks like happy, but he also looks a little proud. I'm thinking he knew what was happening, or at least he had some idea of what TK was going to do. I'm like,
Yeah.
So that's a question then. So what do we think happened there? Because obviously TK went to the hospital in the ambulance.
Yeah.
Carlos was still at the scene and so was the crew. So I've seen different people's opinions and some say, well, TK called Carlos. Others say Carlos just showed up. So what do you guys think happened to get Carlos there?
Yeah, I think Carlos just showed up. I don't know. That just makes the most sense to me. Like, I feel like he was like, okay, I guess, I don't know. I just think he showed up. I don't think there's any, like, committed.
Actually, I think differently. Because he didn't, if they hadn't talked before he came in, I think he would have walked in kind of differently. I do think that he called him and was like, hey, drop by the station in, I don't know, half hour. I don't know if they like really had a big discussion over the phone.
Right.
But like Carlos didn't look like he was afraid of like being turned down again. Like he knew something was happening.
Yeah.
So I do think that they talked before then.
Yeah, I feel like TK might have just called him or texted him and said, hey, can you meet me at the station and, you know, I want to talk to you or something and not really go into it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it kind of at this moment, we also see like Michelle's up on the balcony watching kind of everything that's been going on. And Owen goes to talk to her, which is when she gets a chance to talk to him about finding her sister. Yeah.
I like that scene. It's probably actually my favorite scene between Michelle and Owen because they're just kind of having a heart-to-heart. And I think it very much shows, it nicely represents their friendship. Yeah. And it also kind of shows a little bit of them. Yeah. Because she's softened up talking about her sister. And Owen's almost kind of assuming, like, I don't know, the dad or the big brother role or something. Just being like, okay, here's advice.
Right.
And I like that.
Well, and I think Michelle was struggling just in general of, what do I do? My sister's, you know, she's got problems that she needs taken care of, but she's not willing to help. And, you know, Owen offers some advice because he obviously had just dealt with what's he going to do with his son if he doesn't tell anybody? How can we take care of this? And then TK finally got the courage to do it himself. So, and I love his advice, you know, just be there. Be there for your sister. Meet her where she is, and eventually she'll be ready. Yeah. Because he had to do that with TK.
Yeah. And I gotta wonder, we see TK telling the crew, but I wonder if the paramedic crew knows. Because I didn't see Tim or Nancy there. And Michelle might have overheard because she was up there. But I don't know.
It's a good question.
Yeah, it is a good question.
I feel like if it came out to the team, I feel like it would have naturally at some point come out to the crew as well. Because they do work together. I mean, they operate in the same station.
I mean, Tim and Nancy or just the paramedics would have to know in general, because if, God forbid, something happened to TK and he got hurt, they would need to know that they can't give him narcotic pain medication on scene to treat pain. I mean, they could, but it would be like,
that'd be devastating.
Breaking his sobriety.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Which kind of brought me back to episode 8 and stuff, and even 9 when like he was recovering and like thinking about that.
Wasn't there some mention of ibuprofen?
I think so. Yeah. Yes. It wasn't like stated that like made a big deal because we really didn't see like any doctors or whatever. He was just kind of mentioned about his recovery.
Yeah.
Right. But on the other hand, since we didn't really see much of the whole getting him into the ambulance when he was first shot.
Oh, maybe they had to know it then.
Owen probably had to say something to him then.
Yeah.
So the crew may have known something.
That's interesting. I didn't think of that before, but you're right.
Yeah,
but as his parent, he would know. I know for me, like when I was taking care of my parents, if I had to tell the paramedics, like if somebody came for something, I'd be after like, well, they're allergic to this or they can't have this.
Yeah.
Because if in the time between them getting him in the ambulance and going to the hospital, he could have had a reaction to something. So Owen would have had to say something, but maybe not go into too many details.
Just basically saying no narcotics.
Yeah.
Right.
And they'll listen to that, and they won't ask too many questions.
Right, because he's his dad, like, biologically and legally and stuff. So, yeah, they wouldn't.
Yeah.
And so after the Michelle and Owen talk, we see Paul, Marjan, and Mateo walking out of the station. And I love this scene. I kind of like the three of them, like, having their friendship together.
Yeah.
Brotherly, sisterly relationship.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love the trio.
And Mateo's like, I can eat. And Marjan's like, you can always eat.
I love that.
Yeah.
He's a growing
Curls for the girls.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, in the sky they see the aurora borealis, which is the
northern lights, basically.
Northern lights.
Yeah.
You know, just from the solar flare and all the magnetic particles that are all going haywire in the sky because of the solar flare.
Yeah. I know it was really fake, but I really liked it.
Oh, yeah. It looks good.
It looked good for being
pretty. It was gorgeous.
Yeah.
And then after that scene, we get Grace and Jed at home. Grace is sitting out on the patio and looking at the same sky. And Jed comes in and talks to her, and she's like, I talked to somebody.
He was like, yeah, I think we all did. I was like, oh, boy, you're not getting it yet.
And she's like, no, I talked to somebody from the space station, and she kind of explains it to him. And,
I love how we started taking it seriously, like, oh, you're serious.
Yeah. He's like, oh, you don't just mean God. And, I wrote down this little note here when we were talking about it last because I didn't get to say it, but the goodbye.
Yeah.
So if you guys remember during you guys wouldn't maybe remember because you're a little younger than I am, but during 9/11, after the Pentagon and the towers had been hit, the plane that went down in Pennsylvania.
I've heard stories about passengers calling their families.
Several people called their families to say goodbye.
Yeah.
And back then we didn't have voicemail, so we had like just answering machines.
Yeah.
So there's the stories of the families calling it. So that was what it made me think of, like when he was calling was kind of that goodbye call.
Yeah.
Much like they had done.
Yeah.
For the people that crashed, because they knew something was going on, because by then they'd been hearing things of what happened in New York and in DC. So that's what kind of reminded me of. But also, they did do that. They paralleled that from the 911, because the guy did that in 911. Well,
I didn't think of that before. Which also that's a really good parallel.
Goes back to the memory of Owen's 911 being a first responder on 9/11.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen like the documentary, the 9/11 documentary, so I kind of knew, like, I've seen some of the calls and stuff like that because of that, but like I was only 6 and I don't remember that at all.
I wasn't even born yet. My mom was pregnant with me. But I've always held an interest, mostly from a first responder standpoint, but also just as general interest, especially knowing my mom heard the planes go over. But yeah, when I first heard the stories about like the goodbye calls, I'm like, okay, just break my heart, why don't you?
Yeah, it's so sad.
That whole day was so heartbreaking, and the weeks after it were just so hard, because like networks that are based in New York were just like off air. Like MTV, all they did is play music videos. Like, and if you guys know MTV nowadays, they don't play music videos.
Oh yeah,
they have an entire network now that's MTV videos, and it's all videos. But it was just like there was no TV shows. Certain shows that were supposed to air around that time that had anything to do with negative stuff or crashes, accidents, they were pulled from the air to air or never air.
Yeah.
Really
I mean,
eerie.
I just looked it up. The death count for 9/11, not counting hijackers, was 2,977. So imagine an average of 4 immediate family members, not counting grandparents, for people that were married, their siblings and family. Imagine thousands more people just having to recover from having their loved one or ones killed in such a horrifying act.
Right.
So even years later, it's different.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and modern day wise, it's the most major thing that happened on the American soil. Can be since Pearl Harbor in December 7th, 1941.
Well, I mean, apparently the attacks were the deadliest terrorist act in world history, at least at the time. At least according to Wikipedia. But yeah, I think I know it's not quite as relevant, but my grandfather used to work at the Pentagon, and he has long since died by this point, but like always hearing that the Pentagon got crashed into, like it brings on such a spooky feel to me.
Yeah.
And I've seen pictures and images of like the patches that people wear now that to represent it, and I love how they have it's the shape of a pentagon with a field inside of it, and then the two towers. So it's like representing the three places. And the towers had the most people lose their lives in. And I feel bad that DC and Pennsylvania aren't talked about as much. But yeah, like you said, it's almost 3,000 people that lost their lives. And 343 of them we know are firefighters, and I think 90 of them, I believe, around 90 of them were police officers.
Yeah.
Over 400 first responders lost their lives that day.
Yeah.
So it's just, anyways, that was my little thought about the whole call and what she had to deal with, because that was just heartbreaking. And to this day, like even hearing like just a little clip of somebody saying something about it, I just get choked up because it was just so emotional.
Yeah.
But yeah, thankfully after such an emotional scene, we
Tarlos.
get our the final Tarlos scene of the season.
My favorite.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
The car scene. Tarlos and TK are out in some park or field on top of the hood of Carlos's Camaro.
Yeah.
They're watching the sky.
Yeah. It's like Carlos is like, "What are you thinking?" TK's like, "I'm thinking we make a pretty good team." And Carlos just looks at him and kind of like smirks a little bit, and he's like, "We really do, don't we?"
Like,
and then they like hold hands.
The softness when they look at each other, like the softness there. I can't get over it.
I live for
Yeah.
soft Tarlos, and I live for everything that the scene stands for.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and then I love how the TK reaches for his hand and they join hands, and then like TK pulls his hand over to like his hoodie pocket, which is like that's so TK. He's got his hands in his pockets. And,
I love it so much.
It was so good.
And like there we can see, even if we don't have a direct like title, like are they actually like boyfriends, or what have they worked out? We see they've worked something out.
Yeah.
And TK's comfortable. He's like, okay, I'm taking this step.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, my squeal.
Yeah. Yeah, no.
So after this aired on March 12th, I went back because I wanted to read this appropriately. Rafael Silva posted that picture of them on the car when they're looking at each other. And he said, "Tarlos is my dedication to those in the LGBT plus community around the world who are unable to live in the beautiful and true skin due to the violent social construct. You have the right to be human. Tarlos is yours. May this ship never find mainland so it can keep on sailing."
I love that so much.
Oh,
I love
so good.
that. May this ship never find mainland so it can keep sailing. I love that line.
Yes.
Especially, Rafa is actually gay, correct?
Yes.
And like that holds something different because like he's speaking his own part of that community. And oh my gosh, when I first learned that he was, I'm like, okay, everything's taking a different perspective now, and I'm loving it so much more. Like everything, all the Tarlos scenes, everything he'd said about them and everything, took on a different perspective, and I loved them even more. Because I'm like, we're seeing so much actual representation in the show. Like Paul, Brian is actually trans, and Natasha's actually Muslim, and like so many different things. I'm like, he's actually gay. This is what we needed, and I'm so glad. Like I'm so glad they chose him, and I'm glad Rafa is open about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, he deserves his privacy, but I'm glad. I appreciate what he has shared with us, and I know in June he was part of some of the Pride things Fox did, as well as Brian. Yeah, I'm like you said, I'm really, this was an opportunity to be seen for a lot of people in that community. And I know we see a lot of depicted Caucasian men being gay. So men of other nationalities being gay is not depicted as frequently as well. So I feel like this was a good representation for those as well, not just what we're used to seeing. So this is I love
him so
Tarlos.
much. I'm so excited to see more.
I love what he represents, and I'm so glad that Raphael is playing him. I truly don't think they could have found anybody else to play Carlos and have him be as genuine and real as Carlos. And I say that about Ronan as well. I truly believe that TK and him are meant to be, and Ronan is meant to play TK, and Raphael is meant to play Carlos. Right. And I love their relationship offset. Like, they're really close. They're really good friends.
I love it. I love their lives together and seeing them talk about Tarlos. Like, they're both so excited about the ship.
Yeah. Love that.
Alright, so we go back to Michelle and her sister.
Yeah, that's right. She took the advice Owen gave her.
And she goes back to the camp to give her sister some supplies. And I love that. She's like, okay, I can't bring her home, but I'm going to bring her some stuff that she needs.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then at first she like just gives it to her and then gets ready to leave, thinking that like she wants to like just be left alone. And then her sister's like, why don't you stay? And like the sky's beautiful.
Yeah, she was like want to have a picnic or something.
Her sister invited her to stay. Yeah. Nice night for a picnic. Which and the last scene of the episode is Owen decides to take Buttercup for a walk, and they're walking outside, which Buttercup's on a leash. I know a lot of people don't usually put him on a leash, but he's walking him on a leash, and he stops kind of to look at the sky, kind of looks at Buttercup, and he's like, and I thought the lights in Manhattan were beautiful. And I honestly, I thought that scene would go differently. To be honest, I thought he'd collapse and have like some heart attack.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
I'm so glad I was wrong.
No, I didn't I didn't expect anything bad to happen there. Like, I don't know, I just didn't think that far ahead. I think I was just like, I don't know, I don't usually think too far ahead unless.
I was still high on Tarlos, so like everything after that was just like, oh yeah,
same.
Yeah.
Like I was kind of caught up in the
Cooper agrees.
I was kind of caught up in the moment. And so I wasn't really looking that far ahead, even though typically I'm analyzing every possible thing that can possibly happen. But like when it ended, I was like, okay, like I'm happy with this.
Yeah, same. Cause like, and like at this moment we didn't know how long we'd have to wait like for the new season. Like at that point we thought that maybe fall, cause like this was before like lockdown started and stuff. So like if like they did leave us on a cliffhanger, we had to wait to fall, fine. But if we had to wait for a cliffhanger and wait until January, that would have been the worst.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah.
So good unintentional foresight, Lone Star.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. Yeah, well, and so I think this aired on like right after some of the states were going into lockdown.
Yeah.
And thankfully they'd finished filming and all that.
Yeah.
And then they didn't get renewed until was it April or May. So it was almost 2 months before we found out if it was going to even get renewed.
Yeah.
So that was such a great end of the season, and it was a great season, great first season.
There's just one team more, and we're getting it in just a month.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, I know. Yep. Even less than that by the time this airs.
Yes, true. Wow.
Yeah, well, we did it. We got through season 1 as a podcast.
Yay.
Hope you all enjoyed it as much as we did, because we sure love talking about it. We're definitely looking forward to doing this for season 2, and
we hope you guys stick around for it with us.
Definitely.
Oh, yeah.
We got a lot of fun things planned.
All right.
Thank you guys so much for joining us and listening. Be sure to subscribe to us, and we're on Anchor, Spotify, Apple, and Google Podcasts, and almost anywhere else we can find podcasts. And don't forget to rate us and leave us a review on iTunes. We'd super appreciate it, and we do read those. You can follow the podcast on our socials at 911LS Roundup on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And you can find me, EJ, at EJ8302 at Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.
You can follow me, Katie, at For Love of Tarlos on Instagram and at For Love of Tarlos on Twitter.
You can follow me, Grace, at RonanRafa911 on Instagram and at SheepGirl31 on Twitter.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you guys soon.
Bye. Bye.